History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
Queen Kahumanu served as Regent Prime Minister of Hawaii after the death of her husband, King Kamehameha. Together with her son, they ended all idolatry and human sacrifice on the islands. On this date, March 31st, 1820, the first missionaries, led by Hiram Bingham, arrived in Hawaii on the ship Thaddeus. The Queen receives Christ and helps spread the gospel throughout the islands. Just prior to her death, Queen Kahumanu was presented with the New Testament in the Hawaiian language. Her last words were, "I am going to where the mansions are ready."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us. Breaking news today from the United States Supreme Court. In an 8-1 decision, the court ruled that the ban on so-called conversion therapy, which is really just talk therapy for minors, well, it violates the free speech of licensed counselors. So we'll cover that issue today. We're also going to be talking about a settlement agreed to by the city of Louisville regarding a Christian photographer who was threatened with legal sanction if she did not serve so-called same-sex weddings. And the same photographer was also prohibited by the city for expressing her views on marriage on her own studio's website. Earlier this month, today's guest argued before the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals that could determine the scope of religious liberty protections for faith-based organizations. And this outcome, well, it's going to have huge implications on religious nonprofit organizations. Also on our docket today, a critical case coming before the High Court tomorrow. Oral arguments will be given to settle the birthright citizenship issue. And Lord willing, if there's time, we'll also discuss Sharia, that's Islamic law, creeping into our legal system. And so we'll get into the issues today. Joining us, we have constitutional attorney Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. He has 3 landmark cases before the U.S. Supreme Court that he has won. He is an author, host of radio broadcast Faith and Freedom and Freedom's Call, and the TV broadcast Freedom Alive, all part of the VCY listening family on radio and TV as well. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim. A lot to cover, but a lot of great breaking news that's happening and some deciding events that are even going to begin tomorrow at the Supreme Court of the United States.
Indeed. So let's begin with the breaking news today, this 8-1 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court in a case called Childs v. Salazar. You filed 2 amicus briefs there on behalf of Liberty Counsel, and this ruling really strikes at the ban on what people have referred to as conversion therapy. It's really talk therapy involving minors. Matt, this is a huge decision.
This is a huge decision. After the oral argument that occurred last early October, I knew that this was going to be a win, and it was going to be a big one, just based on how the justices were asking questions and how the argument went. But this is great to see. 8-1. The only dissenter was Justice Ketanji Brown, really out of step with the Constitution. But this really is a huge victory. We began this kind of litigation, Liberty Counsel did in 2012, going against the very first ban on talk therapy in California. And we lost at the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court could have taken the case back then, but they didn't, and who knows what they would have done with a different set of justices. Then we litigated the second case in New Jersey. Again, had a loss there, just continued to litigate as well. But then finally we won 2 cases in the state of Florida. The first wins in the entire country, and it was based on exactly what the Supreme Court decided today in the Childs case. But Colorado, in a different case that we were not a part of at the time, went the other way and disagreed with our courts. That created the conflict with our decisions being victories, 2 of them, and that's how the United States Supreme Court took the case. So we filed a brief asking the court to take the case and a brief on the merits. Here's the issue. in states, and there were over 100. We struck down 23 of these laws. There's 87 still remaining. That's about half of the states, and then also cities and counties, a total of 87 that are still on the books as of this morning. And what they say is if a parent brings their minor child to a counselor, and let's just take California as an example, because the template is exactly the same in all the other 86. If you want to overcome unwanted same-sex attractions, behaviors, or gender confusion, the counselor is prohibited from doing so. The counselor can only affirm someone on an issue that they're not comfortable with. In other words, they can say, well, I know you have these issues. You don't want to have these unwanted attractions or engage in these unwanted behaviors, or you have confusion about whether you're a boy or a girl or neither or both. Let's work on changing your religious and moral values so that you just accept yourself. Well, that's not what I want to do. Well, that's what the law requires the counselor to do. The counselor cannot provide verbal counsel to help someone overcome these unwanted attractions, behaviors, or gender confusion. And if they do, they would lose their license. So we have been litigating this since 2012. This is a great decision, Jim. 87 of these laws are on the books, about half of the states, and then the rest are cities and counties. But here's the thing. It's a great win. I believe there are some just radical, blind type of agendas, California, other states as well, that they're just going to keep the laws on the books, and they're not going to immediately repeal these. So we're going to have to go to each one of these.
Yep.
It's going to be an expensive decision for them to not follow the Supreme Court, but they will end up having to follow it, and all of these laws, all of these harmful, dangerous laws will be gone.
Our city, Milwaukee, one of them, Matt, and they've passed this some time ago, and they really need to feel the heat now from this decision. And to think, Matt, they use the term conversion therapy, and there are people who think, oh, is this shock? Is this electronic probes that are hit people with? But we're talking about talk therapy. We're talking about speech.
Yeah, so the first time that I argued this case was before a district judge in California, and she was asking, well, what goes on in the counseling room? She's trying to conjure up all kinds of things. Maybe you're putting electrodes and shocking them. You're beating them. I said, well, what happens in a counseling room is they just talk.
Right.
She had a hard time grasping it. You mean a counselor and a client, they just talk back and forth? Yeah, that's what they do. They just talk. It's talk therapy. There is no such counseling word called conversion therapy or reparative therapy. That's a political term that's been made up and put in these laws that try to ban talk therapy. And so what Justice Gorsuch wrote is, quote, the spoken word is perhaps the quintessential form of protected speech, and that is exactly the kind of expression in which Ms. Childs seeks to engage. As a talk therapist, all Ms. Childs does is speak with clients. She does not prescribe medication, use medical devices, or employ any physical methods, close quote.
Yeah. Gorsuch also said any law that suppresses speech based on viewpoint represents an egregious assault.
Yeah, so, and here's the viewpoint. Think of a quarter as being a content. You have heads and tails. Heads would be the viewpoint on that. Tails would be the content. Or think of politics. You have Democrats and Republicans. The subject matter is politics, the viewpoint of a Democrat or a Republican. So here you have human sexuality. The viewpoint that the laws allow is pushing somebody down the LGBTQ agenda, puberty blockers, hormones, surgeries, etc. What it doesn't allow is overcoming that. So it really restricts a specific viewpoint on the subject matter, and that's the most serious kind of First Amendment violation. In fact, no viewpoint discrimination law has ever been upheld by the United States Supreme Court.
This is amazing. And you mentioned Ketanji Brown Jackson being the lone dissent in this case, and she's even being called out by liberal colleagues. I mean, Justice Elena Kagan called her out for reimagining settled First Amendment law. I mean, what an indictment against one from the liberal bloc.
Yeah, I know. It's really amazing. This is settled First Amendment law. This is the decision that should have happened back in 2012 when we first argued these cases. It was pretty well settled. It was pretty well settled in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals coming out of San Francisco in California. based on other laws, but they made an exception because it was the LGBTQ agenda, and they carved this out as special treatment and have First Amendment protection. The Supreme Court rejected that in 2015 in a case that we had as well involving crisis pregnancy centers, and that's what gave us the wind in our sails to get the wins in Florida. But some of these other courts, like Colorado, they didn't care, and they went the other way. This is settled First Amendment law. When the government comes in and says, in this particular subject matter, human sexuality, the only permissible viewpoint is for counselors to affirm the LGBTQ agenda. What they can't do is counsel someone who's actually the willing client who wants to receive this information to the contrary. And if you do, you'll lose your license. That's pretty much First Amendment settled law. And our wins in Florida, the Otto and Vaso cases, they also came down exactly the same. It's content restriction, restricting the whole content, but it's worse, it's viewpoint restriction. It restricts only one viewpoint on this matter because the LGBTQ agenda, backed by these politicians, can't stand the truth,
right,
and they don't want an opposing view to be expressed.
So, friends, again today, a tremendous court victory. The decision today, 8-1, Childs v. Salazar. Talk therapy is free speech. Matt, there are many attempts to really take away one's First Amendment rights. However, the success rate to stifle the First Amendment is not boding so well right now. Just last week, the city of Louisville settled with a Christian photographer who was threatened with legal action if she did not serve same-sex weddings. Tell us the story.
Yeah, this has been going on for some time. This is a person who does weddings. She does photography, and she has a blog, has a website. And so Louisville had a law passed in the 1990s, the so-called Fairness Ordinance, and so they came after her, and they said, you need to photograph same-sex marriage ceremonies, and you need to celebrate it on your blog. In other words, you can't just post on your blog, her own blog, on her website. You can't post about marriage as the union of a man and woman. You can't post on your own website your views. The biblical union is between one man and one woman. So this was the challenge. She would have to go out of business. And in this particular case, this Christian photographer and blogger, Chelsea Nelson, filed suit. Well, you know what? She won as far back as 2022 in the lower court, but they continued to litigate. Then the Supreme Court in 2023 issued the Creative 303 case, a very similar kind of case. But you know what? Louisville continued to litigate. They still did not litigate. They still did not, I should say, resolve this question. So now what we have is the case going back down to the lower court in the Louisville case and issued an opinion in 2025, again siding with her under her First Amendment. This is an unconstitutional First Amendment. So finally it took them all the way to 2026, and the case is now settled, and they're going to have to pay $800,000 for their unconstitutional actions.
What a costly mistake for Louisville. And Matt, just one other comment. We're just a minute before the break, but this individual is even prohibited by Louisville from expressing her views on marriage, a biblical union between one man and one woman, on her own studio's website.
Yeah, she couldn't even say that marriage is the union of a man and a woman, and she couldn't express her biblical views. And I assume they probably would even come after her if she only had wedding pictures of a man and a woman, but no people of the same sex. This was outrageous. It's a great settlement. And this is a warning lesson to these governments, especially today after Charles. You better stop censoring Christian and religious viewpoints. It's a costly mistake if you do.
Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel. And friends, a break is coming upon us, but right afterwards, earlier this month, Matt presented oral arguments at the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was a case, Zinsky v. Liberty University. And the outcome of this case is going to have huge implications, in my opinion, on religious organizations across the country. So we're going to take the break. We're going to come back and talk about this particular case, and also heading over then to a case coming before the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow on the matter of the whole aspect of birthright citizenship. It's a case called Trump v. Barbara. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, was ancient man primitive?
Chris, in no sense was ancient man primitive. Man was created in the image of God with a large brain and great intellect, able at the very least to communicate with God in the Garden of Eden. Even in the early chapters of Genesis, man had agriculture, had metalworkings, and he made musical instruments. Those civilizations of man that sprung up right after the flood were likewise quite intelligent. Think about it. Even the pyramids speak of an intelligent engineering ability of high quality, an ability which may have been lost up until recent times. There is no scientific evidence that man rose up from the animals. This is an evolutionary story which doesn't fit the facts. Mankind created intelligence at the start. Now that fits the facts, and that's the Back to Genesis truth.
For more information, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org.
Critical legal issues are our topic today with constitutional attorney Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. Their website, lc.org, lc.org. Matt, just earlier this month, here in March, you went before the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was a case, Zinski v. Liberty University, and this is a case that I believe is going to have huge implications upon religious organizations all over our country. Tell us about the case and what's at stake here.
Yeah, it definitely is. And in fact, the presiding judge actually made that same comment. He said this case needs to be decided by the Supreme Court, and he said they haven't really decided some of the issues here. They decided things around it, but they're going to decide it. But the case clearly has Supreme Court written all over it. Mm-hmm. So it'll affect everyone across the country that are faith-based Christian religious employers. This is a case involving Jonathan Zinski. He, I believe, intentionally set up Liberty University to try to take them down. He was taking hormones, female hormones, for months, and then he applied to Liberty University for the IT position. He signed off on their doctrinal statement, which is very clear that God created us in His image, male and female. There's only two sexes, and that if you try to identify as something other than how God created you at birth, that's a sin. Can't be any clearer than this. He signed off on that as though he's in agreement with it, but he waits for the 90-day probation to expire. He then sends an email to the Liberty University HR department and says, I've been taking these female hormones for now 9 months, I guess, and they make changes in my body before they actually become too more apparent. I want to let you know I'm, quote, transitioning. I'm going to identify as a female, changing my name legally to Eleanor. And then, get this, and this is the crux of it, he attends a so-called LGBTQ-affirming church that accepts this LGBTQ sinful lifestyle, and he wants Liberty to accept it, even though he knows Liberty's doctrine is different. Mm-hmm. He wants Liberty to accept it, and they all go live happily ever after. Liberty brings him in, talks to him, and says, you affirm the doctrinal statement, it's very clear, and they terminate him. He files suit. Now we're at the Court of Appeals. I think the interesting section of the oral argument was Judge Quattlebaum, who was a Trump appointee, asked a hypothetical question for the ACLU attorney when the ACLU attorney was up. And he said, hypothetically assume a church has 16 employees. One of them is a janitor, and now the janitor wants to be, quote, transgender. But it's against the church's doctrine. Would the church be forced to continue to employ that person? The ACLU said yes. Now, the Obama-appointed judge, and he was the presiding judge, he pushed back and he says, well, I don't like the word force. You're saying that the court would have to force them to continue to employ somebody who is contrary to their doctrine? Would that not require the courts to actually involve itself into the doctrine of the church and force the church to do something? Mm-hmm. And I think that was, a critical moment of the case. Wow. So I think the court will make a ruling. You don't know which way it's going to ultimately go, but the argument went, I think, very well.
Man, when do you anticipate a decision?
We don't really know. It's up to the court to make that decision. They actually had 3 religious liberty cases that day. Our case was the leadoff case, and our case kept getting referred to in the subsequent cases. I've never been in a situation where we've had 3 religious liberty cases back-to-back. Mm-hmm. So this is the first in my whole career. Usually you have a bunch of criminal cases that surround your case, and then you have your case. it's either before or after. But this time, 3 religious liberty cases. They're going to decide all 3. I don't know when. It'll take maybe several months. But either way, whoever loses at this level will have the option to petition the United States Supreme Court. And I think that's the ultimate destiny of this case at the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm looking forward to that if that's where we're going, because I want to create a precedent that lasts for generations and impacts the entire nation.
Yeah. And again, this is something that will impact religious organizations and churches all over the country.
Yeah, and I asked, I said when I was making my argument, which the court gave me more time at in my section as well as in the rebuttal, and then the presiding judge talked a lot during the ACLU's argument. Instead of making a question, he just talked, about this case. But I said in my argument, I said, if Liberty University can't win this case, then nobody can, and their religious freedom is nothing.
Yeah.
It means nothing. Because here you have liberty with a specific Christian mission and doctrine. And you have an employee that wants to replace that particular employee's doctrine with liberties and have liberty accepted. Well, Liberty has thousands of employees, and it really doesn't matter if you have, 15 or 15,000. You have a lot of employees. Well, if you have what the ACLU wants, that is, every employee can impose their doctrine on the church or the religious organization, then the church or religious organization has no doctrine. It's only on paper. And I said, particularly in a university, universities actually communicate their mission not only in the classroom and through the curriculum, but through their employees. If, you have a doctrinal statement that says this, but the employees act in the contrary, then the students and parents and others observing Liberty or any other institution will say, well, that's hypocritical. They don't really mean what they say, and therefore they really don't have a mission. And that's contrary to the very core principles of religious freedom protected by the First Amendment.
Friends, be praying about the outcome of this case. Zinski v. Liberty University, decision forthcoming. We don't know when, but be praying for the judges on this case, and be praying. Friends, because of the implications here, I would pray in favor of the Liberty University in this particular case. Matt, tomorrow there is a very important case before the U.S. Supreme Court dealing with the issue of birthright citizenship, a guarantee of citizenship to virtually anyone born in the United States. It's a case called Trump v. Barbara. And, Matt, again, another huge issue, especially as people see the United States as being a destination location to have a baby. Illegal aliens coming to our country have a baby, and now all of a sudden there's U.S. citizenship. Comment on this case and the matter coming before the court tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a big case. The Supreme Court could just rule on a narrow issue, the executive order that President Donald Trump issued, which I can talk about in a few moments, or they can rule on the broader issue, the actual issue of birthright citizenship. Mm-hmm. So this is a huge issue. It's not been before the court in many, many years. So it begins with the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Remember, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment after the Civil War. And you had black Americans who were not considered full citizens at the time. And so what you had is the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to address that. The 14th Amendment says, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The real question here is what is meant by subject to the jurisdiction thereof. People that are born in the United States and they're subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So the United States takes the position that it is not just temporary, visitation, that the United States takes the position that the focus is on the parent, not on the child. It's on the parent. And the parent, of course, would be the one who needs to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Well, an illegal alien would not be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Somebody who's unlawfully present, for example, the mother, would not be fully subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. somebody who is temporarily here on a temporary visa without intending to have a domicile here in the United States is not subject to the laws of the United States. Now, if they break a law, will they be punished? Yes. But are they fully subject to the laws of the United States? And so that's really more of a technical argument.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're saying is the 14th Amendment, the government, they're saying the 14th Amendment was designed to address the issue of black babies that were born and the parents that weren't full citizens, and so those children would have U.S. citizenship. There's also the discussion of that's clearly what seems to be within the 14th Amendment. That's clearly what it seems to be in terms of the understanding. The ACLU has a different view of that. But there's also a law, 1401. It's a law that essentially says the same thing. This is a law passed by Congress. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. The ACLU says that that changes the understanding of who can be a citizen. The United States says that doesn't change the understanding because Congress wouldn't come in and try to override the First Amendment. And in fact, they're using the same exact language, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So Donald Trump's executive order says essentially this. It has several parts. One part is, part one, when that person's mother is unlawfully present in the United States and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of the person's birth, then they're not a citizen. Or when that person's mother's presence in the United States at the time of said person's birth was lawful but temporary, such as but not limited to visiting the United States under the auspices of the Visa Waiver Program or visiting on a student, work, or tourist visa, and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of the person's birth. So the executive order tries to follow this legal idea that in order to be subject to the laws of the United States, there has to be certain requirements. You can't just simply walk into the United States, give birth to a child, and then have that person be a citizen of the United States. You can't illegally cross the border because you are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States in the way that the Constitution designs it. You can't fly in, have your child, and now you have citizenship, and then you go back to your country with your child and they have citizenship there. So there's got to be something more. It doesn't seem like Congress or the Constitution would have had fly-in babies, basically, or illegal people entering the country, giving birth, and now they're subject, to the laws of the United States because they're now a U.S. citizen. It doesn't seem like that's what the Constitution actually meant or what any of the previous rules have indicated. So there have been differences of opinion of that throughout history, like Roosevelt wanted to expand it, but Roosevelt didn't have the authority. He didn't have Congress, and he didn't have the Constitution. He couldn't change that. So it's an interesting issue. It's a huge case with big implications because what it means is if they ultimately rule against President Trump, not only on the executive order, because they could strike down the executive order as an option if they wanted to, but not address the legal underlying issue and save that for another day. But if they address the underlying legal issue about what does the 14th Amendment mean, do you have to be domiciled here and have an intention to stay here, and you're here lawfully and legally? If they say that, that's a huge win for this issue of citizenship and what the president is trying to do. On the other hand, if they say no, anybody who pops across the border, gives birth to their child, then they're part of the citizenship of the United States, and trying to evict that person would be very difficult.
Yeah. Matt Stavers with us from Liberty Counsel. We're up against a break, so we'll take the break. We'll come back more on this birthright citizenship issue, and then also we want to get to the matter of the Islamic law creep into our country, the Sharia, and these tribunals that are popping up across our country right now. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
It has been said, bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote. Every election cycle gets more intense, and there is much at stake. Often there are questions, how should I vote? Why should I vote? And who should vote? In the book, The Bible and Your Vote, Dr. Andy Woods addresses these questions so every Christian can vote with confidence, no matter who or what is on the ballot. The Bible and Your Vote offers biblical and historical insights on 5 key categories: economics, social issues, climate, power and personal rights, and foreign policy. These timeless principles will help you quickly identify candidates whose character or agenda best reflects biblical values. VCY is offering The Bible and Your Vote for a donation of $15 or more. Call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, talking about critical legal issues. And friends, you've heard Matt refer to, the recent the amendments here, the 14th Amendment in particular, added to the U.S. Constitution, 1868, was intended to ensure that, formerly enslaved people and their children were U.S. citizens. The question is, friends, do you own a copy of the Constitution? Do you have a copy? Because this is what, it's like a ruler that you're judging things according to the Constitution. And we do have them available. The majority of cost is just getting them to you through the shipping, but we make one copy of this, the Constitution, available. It's a pocket-sized booklet, a donation of $3, 5 copies for a donation of $12, 10 copies available for a donation of $20. And all you need to do is reach out to our switchboard here at 800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829. Matt, before we continue on here on this birthright citizenship, give us a word about Liberty Counsel.
Well, Liberty Counsel is a religious liberty organization. Anita and I founded it in 1989. We advance religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and God's design for marriage and family. And we do that all over the country. We've had cases at the United States Supreme Court multiple times. In fact, today, this is a big win at the U.S. Supreme Court in the Childs case. We filed 2 briefs in that case. Our website is lc.org. Very simple, just lc.org. If you have a question, need assistance, know somebody who does, or want to keep us involved with something in your community, just go to our website and you'll find out how to reach us. You can fill out a legal help form or just send us an email right there at lc.org.
And matter of fact, even talking about this talk therapy case, the win today, if people have this in their community and want to see it overturned, they can reach out to you as well. Yeah,
that's a good information because, a lot of times if we don't know what's going on in your community, then we can't get involved. A lot of times when we find out, we can make a huge difference. We are tracking these 87 different laws, but we want to find out what's going on. We don't always know what's going on in your community. Is your city going to pass these, or I should say repeal them? Mm-hmm. What about your state legislature? I think it's now time in your cities, counties, or state legislators to go there and say, you know what, it's time to repeal these laws. You need to do that, and if they don't do it, contact us, because we're going to go after them, make sure that these laws are repealed and they're off the books forever.
Friends, again, their website, lc.org, or by phone 407-875-1776. Matt, we're talking about Trump v. Barbara and the birthright citizenship issue, specifically the executive order that was issued and the challenges that happened. But we see the broader issue as well with the whole matter of birthright citizenship. It's been talked about for decades. How important do you believe it is to really give finality to this issue and not just have a narrow decision that's going to kick the can down the road further?
Yeah, I do think it's important to give finality to this decision. It's really critical, especially we've seen this during the invasion, basically during the Biden administration, with millions of people crossing the border illegally. And some of those people, we've seen this also in Middle Eastern countries. We've known this happens for some time. They fly into the United States. They have no intention or interest in staying here. They give birth to their child, in the United States. Now that person is a United States citizen and a citizen of, say, Saudi Arabia, Iran, or wherever it might be. Now they have dual citizenship, so they can come and go in the United States as they want to. That's dangerous, especially when we have enemies abroad and enemies within that are trying to target the United States for harm. I think it's a critically important citizenship issue that needs to be decided under the Constitution. I can't imagine the founders of the country saying that just by dropping, parachuting in or coming in illegally across, the border at night, you give birth, and now that person is a citizen of the United States. That's illegal, and to reward somebody with some kind of legal status, I think, is just totally contrary to the Constitution. But I think it also really affects our national security and well-being. That's why I think it's so important that they reach the merits of the case and do it correctly, by the way.
And, friends, tomorrow is when the oral argument will be given before the United States Supreme Court. So be praying for the court as they hear the argument, and then as they will likely meet at the end of the week to determine their decisions and then start writing the majority-minority opinions on that. Matt, we do want to squeeze one more issue in our program today, and there is a definite Islamic law creep into our legal system. It's called Sharia, and there are even Sharia tribunals that are popping up across the country. And, Matt, frankly, Sharia is not compatible with our Constitution or our system of laws.
No, it's not at all compatible, and so we've been looking at a lot of different outrageous situations in the United States. In Texas, for example, Texas is dealing with this epic city where these Sharia people are trying to create an entire community that would ultimately be run by Sharia law. Now, the citizens voted against that. Representative Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, is now fighting to stop this creeping Sharia. So he has the bill, H.R. 5722. There's a companion version, S3009. It's called the Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act, Preserving a Sharia-Free American Act. So we're asking members of Congress to, both House and Senate, to pass the Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. And how serious is that? Well, in 2021, a U.S. judge in Texas ruled that an American citizen and a Texas resident could only divorce her Texas-based Muslim husband in a Sharia-governed tribunal instead of a proceeding through the Texas civil court system. Under Sharia, women have no rights. And there's one case, interestingly, where a judge would refuse to give a restraining order to a woman who was brought to America in her country at 9 years old. She was given in a forced marriage to this man. A few months later, they fly into the United States. He sexually abuses her, locks her up, beats her, and continually sexually abuses her. She ends up going to a court trying to get a restraining order. The judge in New Jersey refuses to do it because the father said, well, under Sharia law, I'm able to do whatever I want to with my wife. Now, this husband eventually got indicted criminally for what he was doing, and that's the only relief that this woman had. Now this person is spending time in jail, but the civil court judge refused to follow American law and instead allowed this person to do what he was doing to this girl because of Sharia law. That was your law.
Yeah.
That was permitted under your law. So that's the crazy thing about this. And there's lots of different situations like this where Sharia law is completely incompatible with our Constitution and our way of life.
Well, friends, keep in mind that the implications of Sharia infiltrating into our country is really staggering. And as Matt mentioned, Congressman Roy has introduced now the Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. It's H.R. 5722. H.R. 5722. There's a Senate companion, S3009. You can reach out to your member of Congress. Two numbers, one House switchboard, 202-225-3009. 224-3121. Senate switchboard 202-224-3121. I'd like to open our phone lines here today on Crosstalk and to give you opportunity to ask Matt a question as it pertains to any of these issues that we've brought about today. Our number to Crosstalk, 1-800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. But if you missed the beginning of the program today, the breaking news that just came from the United States Supreme Court today, it was an 8-1 decision ruling that the ban on talk therapy that's been dubbed conversion therapy, again, it's just talk therapy with minors. Hey, you're violating the free speech rights of counselors, licensed counselors, and there are huge implications for that. Even, Matt, there are those who are wanting to take that even step further, saying that, that would prohibit even pastors from being engaged in this talk therapy as well.
Oh, yeah, it would. They start off with licensed counselors counseling minors. But if it's harmful, in their view, to counsel a minor, then it would be harmful to counsel somebody else. And if it's harmful for a professional to counsel, which is their view, then it would be even more harmful for a non-professional, like an unlicensed counselor who's a pastor. Mm-hmm. So the ultimate goal is total silence. They tried to start on one end of the spectrum, and they intended to move through the entire spectrum, but now their agenda has come to an end.
Yeah, it has. Friends, our number to Crosstalk is 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel, his website, lc.org. Let's go to Holly, who is calling from Venice, Florida. Hi, Holly, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for your program. I just had a quick question. We have laws that we established here in America in our Constitution and throughout America. We've had these laws, and I know states have their own laws in certain areas too, but my question is, I don't understand how someone can come from another nation with another religion or whatever and their own laws that go along with that religion. How does that override our law? And I'll take your answer off.
Great.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. And Matt, and it's not just religion. We're talking about a political system that is true under Islam.
Yeah, we're talking about a political system. So Sharia courts automatically revoke, say, for example, a mother's child custody rights when the children reach either age 2 or 7 years old, depending upon the type of Sharia that's followed, and the child is a boy or a girl. So that is totally incompatible with our law. So how does this happen? It's not legally binding, but what is happening is the creep is happening, and so you actually have some cases like this. This is 2021. This is not a long time ago. This judge in Collin County, Texas, as I mentioned, ruled that Mariam Ayad could only divorce her Texas-based Muslim husband in a Sharia-governed tribunal.
Wow.
So in Texas, the Muslims were setting up their own Sharia tribunals. They weren't authorized by the state, but they were creating them, and they were creating this system. And so the Texas judge actually deferred to that system. Now, that's not the law of the land, and the more you continue to pretend that that is permissible, the more you get a foothold in, and before you know it, you can't reverse it, and then lo and behold, Sharia becomes, acceptable. Mm-hmm. That's why the Representative Chip Roy in Texas, because Texas, believe it or not, you would think it's one way. There's a lot of mosques that are popping up.
Yes.
There's a whole city, a whole community called the Epic Community, Epic City. They actually had the citizens vote on that statewide, and they voted it down. But they were trying to, and they're still trying to infiltrate into Texas to bring Sharia there. That's why he has introduced this Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. That would make it completely unlawful across the country to use Sharia in any kind of your decisions.
And friends, keep in mind that it has to go through Congress in order to be passed, and you can reach out to your member of Congress at 202-224-3121 and 202-225-3121. We are going to take a break. We'll come back to more of your phone calls. I see we have a couple open lines yet at 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel, their website, lc.org. Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 3, as you know, erects an image of gold, and he commands everyone to worship. And what is the cue that they're to do that? Well, there is the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, and the lyre, and in symphony with all kinds of music. Music, of course, was created by God to be used to glorify him, to praise him, but Satan likes to corrupt many things that are good and great and holy. And he likes to corrupt music. And music, of course, as we know, can be used to manipulate emotions, manufacture unity, muffle dissent, and masquerade a lie as truth. I have many quotes by well-known rockers talking about how they deliberately use music to promote rebellion and chaos. Music should be used to glorify the Lord, to be what is good. Here we see Nebuchadnezzar using it for bad, and Satan does it even today, even in many of our modern churches.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel. LC.org is their website, and even during the program, another breaking news event. Matt, a federal judge today has ordered the construction on the White House ballroom project halted. Sides with a historic preservation group that argued the effort violated federal law and evidently said, well, you're going to have to go before Congress to get this thing approved.
You know, that is so aggravating when you see judges do this kind of thing. It seems like they judge shop and they find a judge that doesn't like what President Obama or President Trump is doing. Forgive me for saying that. President Trump is doing. You get these other judges appointed by either Biden or Obama, and they make these rulings. They're going to be reversed. It's just maddening that President Donald Trump has to go through this time and time again.
Yeah, every decision, every issue. Let's go to Tony in Neillsville, Wisconsin. Tony, you're on the air.
Hey, I would just like to say, Matt, that if President Trump loses both houses of Congress because people don't want to get out and vote, them caravans are going to start again immediately. And the state of Virginia, you need to keep an eye on that. That Eleanor Spamberger, this Islamic dude, is wanting to take all the guns away from the people in the state, every kind.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.
Yeah,
and Matt, there's a lot of egregious matters happening in Virginia right now.
Oh, yeah, Virginia is just out of control with the Democrats there, and you have a lot of Islamic infiltration in the northern Virginia and also even in the central part of Virginia down by Redbug. That's a place that has a total Islamic community that's associated with Sheikh Gilani, who was the person who likely murdered the Washington Post journalist that came to Daniel Pearl, that came, I think his name was Daniel Pearl, that came to go do an article on him.
Thank you, Tony. Let's go next to, Kim is next in Peoria, Arizona. Kim, you're on the air.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for taking my call. Your Honor, Mr. Staver, I have a couple questions. One is a person that I worked with processing payments for a global company, the evening before the mayor in New York got elected. Anyway, he was trying to force me into learning this Arabic language, and he was really pushing his weight on me. He was working right next to me in the next station. There was another gal that comes to him to check out all her goods. She had, all I said to her is, even Mohammed didn't have the assurance of heaven because...
Kim, you're being confused by your radio. Just keep talking to us, please.
I think
go ahead, Matt.
You're fading in and out. I would say, go to the Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org, and complete that legal help form so that we can get some of the background and find out what is the issue and try to reach out and help you.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Paul in New Jersey, you're on the air. Hello, Paul. You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, I just your comment. My question to you is, according to this Islamic, I believe it's an ideology like you guys probably do, but the Sharia law thing, couldn't they go the Supreme Court way? And you think that would be I know it wouldn't be probably as secure as the Senate and House way, but do you think that would be one avenue? Is just somebody sues them?
Well, they could. I mean, if you had a case like, say, for example, this one that I was telling you about this divorce situation, and if that judge then forced this to go through the Sharia courts, that woman could ultimately appeal that, ultimately go up all the way to the United States, and the Supreme Court could rule that would be unconstitutional. That's another way to get something there. So if you have some issue like that, certainly that could be challenged. It's going to be a woman, no doubt. It's not going to be a man in most cases. It's going to be a woman who's suppressed by the Sharia law that finds herself on the losing end of Sharia. And she would just have to appeal that through the court system, and that would potentially go to the United States Supreme Court. I would anticipate, however, once it got up to higher courts, even before the U.S. Supreme Court, that would be overturned. But, you never know.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Right. Thank you.
Gary in Mesa, Arizona, you're on the air.
Yeah, I was going to say Sharia law is obviously a violation of the 13th Amendment concerning involuntary servitude or a punishment that is not relevant. I was going to say maybe this is a poor example, but how about Warren Jeffs? Look at all the things he did. And he certainly is paying for it in prison with all of the molestations, illegal marriages, and who knows what else he's doing. Isn't there some kind of a comparison there? If it's not legal for him, it's not legal for anybody else.
Thank you, Gary.
No, I agree. I mean, Representative Chip Roy, who sponsored this bill that we've been talking about, says, quote, America is facing an existential threat, the spread of Sharia law from Texas to every state in the Union. Instances of Sharia law adherence have threatened the American way of life, seeking to replace our legal system and Constitution with an incompatible ideology that diminishes the rights of women, children, and individuals of different faiths. Yeah. I think that's true, and that's why this Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act ought to pass.
Thank you, Gary. We're going to squeeze Nancy in Fairview, Texas. You're on the air, Nancy.
Yes, thank you. Every time we hear Sharam Hadian or Usama Dakdok speak, they say they're just a phone call away. Mm-hmm. So what is the role of the church? Should our pastors be inviting these men to come in and speak to the church?
Oh, absolutely. I think, pastors ought to obviously know the Bible, but these are critical issues that the Bible would speak to. And, if we don't speak out on these things, we're going to lose our religious freedom. Yeah. So whether it's LGBTQ or Sharia, abortion, or a host of other things, I think pastors ought to be speaking out on these issues, and churches ought to be educating people. I can tell you what, if churches don't, guess what? The world will, and we're not going to like the result.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And Matt, Liberty Counsel is there, and you are defending churches and religious liberty, and it's really important for churches to be plugged in. We think about, what's happening in so many of these cases, like the Liberty case that you're involved in right now. I mean, the implications are huge for the church.
Yeah, the implications are huge, and everything that Liberty Counsel does, we do at no cost. So that is our ministry. We're supported by tax-deductible contributions. But that's our calling, that's our ministry, and, we believe that one person can make a huge difference. You may not be looking for a controversy, nobody is, but when something knocks on your door, take a stand for truth and righteousness, and God will do incredible things beyond what you can imagine, ask, or think.
Amen. Again, friends, it's lc.org, the website, or by phone 407-875-1776. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel talking about critical legal issues, friends. And most important, keep it all in prayer. God bless you. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.